My number two, since we're talking about the 1996 Survivor Series, is another match on that show, which is Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I think this is as good as the WrestleMania 13 match. I have a feeling you're going to have this on your list, so I'm not going to go on too much about it.
Well, it's my number two as well.
Okay, so we can just go through it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's because the build up to this one to me is more compelling than the build up to WrestleMania 13, because Austin is goading Bret Hart to come back. When he does come back, Austin needs to be the first guy to face him. It's very clear that Austin wants to face him because he wants to make a name for himself. If you put an S in front of Hitman, you get my exact opinion of Bret Hart. And then you can talk. I mean, you've wrestled before, so you see things in wrestling matches that maybe I wouldn't see. And you text me something that was interesting during the match, which is a really good story. Not to it.
So it's Bret Hart always thinks in depth about his big matches. You know, he always tries to make them memorable by having special like little moments that if you look for them, and even if you're not like subconsciously the register, but he has these moments that really connect and sort of highlight that he's an actual genius when it comes to putting these things together. And you know, the story is Austin thinks he's better than Bret, and Bret's like, no, like, you're good, and he always puts him over. That's how good he is, but I am still the best there is, you know. And that story is played out throughout the whole match, and there's lots of little things, but the one that always stood out to me was Bret kind of goads him into doing stuff, like, because he's the experienced wily veteran, right? And he kind of almost wants to take the stunner so he can kick out of it, you know, because he knows he can probably take one and kick out in kayfabe world, right? He then uses Austin's stun gun, which was his WCW finisher, the gimmick on the ropes, right, to piss him off. And he's kind of needling at him. As a babyface, though, you know, needling at him. To the point where he ends up basically goading him into putting on the $1 Million Dream. So Austin's, you know, he hasn't used that move since DiBiase left. I don't think he'd used it at any point since then. So it was obviously out of character. And the reason that Austin has to use it is because he's tried everything. He did, because I think he does the sharpshooter as well, doesn't he, on Bret? So he's tried doing him with his own move. He's tried doing him with the stunner. And he's like, well, what have I got left at this point? Like, maybe this guy is better than me. And he's like, you know, it's like going to the well, isn't it? Or, you know, reaching deep down and pulling something out. And he's like, well, I've used this before, won with this before. Puts on the $1 Million Dream, which is exactly what Bret wants, because Bret, you know, positions himself and does the thing where he steps up the ropes and rolls back into the pin, which is exactly what he did to Piper at WrestleMania 8. And Bret knows that if he's in that sleeper, he's got just enough time to get himself into that position and get the pin. And that the guy doing it, because he's trapped in the sleeper, there's no way of kicking out, which is a perfect finish because it protects Austin so well. Because Austin's not been beaten, really. You know, he hasn't been bested. He's just been slightly outsmarted. He hasn't been out-wrestled. He's been outsmarted by the veteran. And that's perfect. That's how an older, you know, veteran wrestler should beat the upcoming guy. I mean, Bret probably should have put him over at some point. Yeah, and I'm sure he would have if he hadn't left, you know, but
it's like a difference between,
it's so clever.
If you look at, like, it's not to get at these guys, but it's the example I can think of in my head. If you look at Rock and Cena. Rock and Cena had that great first match at 28. Yeah. People loved it. Then they came back at 29 and basically had the same match for about 2/3 of it and then just did false finishes. They didn't do anything different. No. Whereas here they had this technical match where there's that story of Bret trying to go to Austin and Austin doing everything he can try and do to beat Bret Hart, and then Bret Hart being right that he was the best there is. And then they come back at WrestleMania 13, and between Survivor Series and WrestleMania, Steve Austin is so clever, basically screws Bret at every opportunity. Rumble, the night after Final Four, all the way, and then they have this Street Fight at WrestleMania, or submission match, sorry, at WrestleMania. They have this submission match where they have a completely different type of match.
Yeah, it's completely different.
To the Survivor Series one. So
Bret's never going to have the same big match twice.
No. I mean, it's a shame that their match at the following pay-per-view wasn't good because Bret was injured. But
yeah, I mean, you kind of forget that one in the series, don't you?
Yeah, just kind of have to. Just sweep that
it's
one
under. It's not bad.
It's not, but it's not these two.
It's nothing like that.
But I mean, this one is just...
I mean, it's weird you say about the WrestleMania build, because you got to remember, though, the build for WrestleMania was Shawn and Bret. You know, that's where they were going.
Well, that was the problem with WrestleMania was it was all kind of erratic because they didn't really know what they were building because one week they'd have one match and then Shawn would lose a smile and then somebody would get injured and then somebody and it was
all over the place.
Yeah, and then WrestleMania 13 suffered on pay-per-view as a result of that because it didn't have a big...
Sid and Taker had this big build.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course. So, yeah, but it. I mean, I prefer this to 13 as a wrestling match for the reasons we sort of talked about on the other shows. But yeah, it's an incredible match. This was almost my number one pick, but it wasn't.
Almost your number one.
Almost, obviously, because it was number two. But it was a lot closer than that. It was a last minute sort of no.
Yeah,
you know,
good pick. Well, because I've got the same pick.
It's a great match.
It's time for our number ones though, and my number one is